I didn't catch my wife cheating in the way movies promise. There was no late-night phone call I overheard, no lipstick stain, no dramatic confession. Just a receipt in her coat pocket for a cafe she never visited with me, printed at 2:14 p.m. on a Tuesday when she had told me she was buried in meetings. It was small enough to ignore. Ordinary enough to excuse. But something inside me shifted the moment I held it. Marriage, I would later understand, doesn't collapse in a moment. It erodes quietly until one insignificant detail confirms what you already feel. Lena and I had been living parallel lives for almost a year. Conversations reduced to logistics. Meals eaten while scrolling separate screens. Even arguments felt like administrative tasks rather than emotional events. So when I found the receipt, I didn't confront her. I folded it back into the pocket and placed the coat exactly where I'd found it. That night, she asked how my day was. "Fine," I said. She nodded as if that answer had always been enough. Her name was Sarah. Lena hated Sarah with a casual intensity that never fully made sense to me. They had worked together briefly years earlier, and Lena described her as performative, too friendly, not trustworthy. The kind of dislike built on instinct rather than incident. I met Sarah only a handful of times through mutual friends. She was quiet in group settings, observant, someone who laughed more at others' jokes than her own. After the receipt, I started noticing absences more than presences. Lena's late evenings. Her habit of turning her phone screen away without realizing. The way she no longer asked follow-up questions about my day. And somewhere inside that quiet inventory, Sarah resurfaced in my mind, not as a romantic possibility, but as a symbol. Someone Lena disliked. Someone outside our marriage's closed loop. I told myself I wasn't planning revenge. But I also didn't stop when Sarah texted me one afternoon asking if I still had a book she'd lent years ago. I did. I suggested coffee. Sitting across from Sarah felt unexpectedly normal. No tension. No flirtation. Just conversation that moved without effort. She asked about my work and actually listened. She remembered details I'd forgotten sharing. When I mentioned Lena, she didn't react with curiosity or judgment, just a polite nod. Halfway through the conversation, I realized something uncomfortable. I was relaxed. That realization carried more guilt than excitement. Over the next few weeks, coffee became walks, walks became dinners, and dinners became long conversations parked outside her apartment where neither of us rushed to leave. I kept telling myself this was temporary. A balancing act. A quiet way to reclaim dignity. But revenge, I discovered, doesn't feel sharp. It feels hollow. Because every moment I spent with Sarah, I was aware of the invisible audience in my head, Lena's imagined reaction, friends' assumptions. My own internal narrative of fairness. The connection itself became secondary to what it represented. The exposure happened at Amir's birthday dinner. It was one of those gatherings where couples were expected, attendance assumed, and dynamics quietly observed. I arrived with Sarah. There was no announcement. No explanation. Just the subtle ripple of recognition as conversations paused for half seconds longer than usual. Lena arrived 20 minutes later. I watched the moment she saw us. Not shock. Not devastation. Recognition. As if she'd been anticipating this possibility without believing it would materialize. She greeted people, hugged Amir, took her seat across the table from me. The evening continued with forced normalcy, the clinking of glasses, overlapping conversations, laughter that sounded slightly over-rehearsed. Sarah remained composed beside me, engaging when spoken to, never leaning into proximity for effect. Halfway through dinner, Lena finally spoke directly to me. "You look well," she said. "So do you." It was the most civil exchange we'd had in months. But beneath it sat an unspoken acknowledgement, something irreversible had surfaced. The turning point wasn't Lena's reaction. It was Amir. Toward the end of the evening, he raised his glass for a toast that shifted tone midway. To old friendships, he began, smiling around the table. And to honesty, even when it arrives late. It wasn't accusatory. It wasn't dramatic. But it landed. The room grew quieter in a way that felt collective rather than uncomfortable. For the first time, our private deterioration existed in shared awareness. Secrecy dissolved, not through confrontation, but through recognition. Control, I realized, had shifted not to me or Lena, but to reality itself. Lena and I spoke 2 days later. No raised voices. No revelations. Just clarity. "I think we both left a long time ago," she said. I didn't disagree. There was a strange relief in that conversation, like finally setting down something heavy neither of us admitted carrying. She didn't ask about Sarah. I didn't ask about the receipt. We discussed logistics instead, apartment arrangements, finances, timelines. The mechanics of uncoupling. Marriage ending not with explosion, but with administrative calm. My last conversation with Sarah happened a week after Lena moved out. We sat in her living room, the same quiet that once felt comforting now carrying a different weight. "Were you ever really here?" she asked gently. The question wasn't accusatory. Just curious. I thought about our dinners, our walks, the laughter, the comfort. All real moments. But layered over intention. "I don't know," I admitted. She nodded, as if that answer completed something. "I liked who you were when you forgot why you came," she said. That sentence stayed with me long after I left. The divorce finalized 3 months later. No court battles. No dramatic fallout. Just signatures, exchanged documents, and the quiet redistribution of shared belongings. Friends adjusted. Conversations moved on. Lena and I became people with history rather than partners with tension. Occasionally I would wonder about the men from the cafe receipt, but curiosity faded quickly. The answer no longer mattered. What lingered instead was the realization that revenge had never been about Sarah, or Lena, or fairness. It had been about feeling small. About wanting evidence that I still mattered. And somewhere between the receipt and the paperwork, I understood something simpler. Being chosen out of retaliation isn't the same as being chosen at all. The night the divorce finalized, I sat alone on my balcony watching traffic thin into early morning silence. No celebration. No sadness sharp enough to name. Just space. For the first time in years, my life felt undefined rather than broken. I thought about Sarah's question, "Were you ever really here?" And for the first time, I considered a different one. Where might I be, if I stopped trying to win stories that were already over? The answer didn't arrive. But the question felt like movement. And that was enough.